Sweet. Okay, so for this entire project, I have Private Herbert George Maybank. So born on July 4th. Well, like we have the same month as birthdays, which is pretty cool. So he's born on July 4th, 1893 in London, Ontario. He lived with his mother, Marion, and his father, John. Marion was estimated to have been born in 1855. Her original name was Marion Bates. She married her first husband, John Maybank, in 1891. So she actually had Herbert at 38, which is pretty old in those times. So 8 years later, John died, and Marion remarried Herbert Tatham on September 18th, 1899, changing her name to Marion Tatham. Unfortunately, Mr. Tatham died only 3 years later on October 25th, 1900, before she and her son moved to Winnipeg, settling on 254 Balmoral Street in Winnipeg. So in Winnipeg, Herbert G. Maybank was a Presbyterian who frequented Augustine United Church on River Avenue in Osborne Village. Still today, on the front lawn of Augustine United Church, there is a carved stone memorial commemorating parishioners who fought and died in the First World War. Herbert Maybank is one of them. So after attending Kelvin High School, Herbert took the train to Vancouver in order to enlist in the 29th Battalion, also known as Tobin's Tigers. On November 13, 1914, he officially enlisted. With no previous military experience other than being a Winnipeg school cadet, he was ranked a private and traveled to Britain with his battalion on May 20th, 1915. In Britain, he spent the majority of his first couple months at Shorncliffe, which is a training camp. His time was spent in the fields and in St. Martin's Plain Hospital. On September 17, 1915, the 29th Battalion disembarked in France and Flanders, where they fought as the 6th Infantry Brigade of the 2nd Canadian Division until the end of the war. After the war, the battalion was disbanded on August 30th, 1920. Tobin's Tigers is perpetuated by the British Columbia Regiment because while in France and Flanders, the 29th Battalion fought at the Battle of the Somme, Ypres, Vimy, and St. Eloi, the battle in which Herbert Maybank was declared dead. The Battle of St. Eloi was the first major engagement for the 2nd Canadian Division. Fought in mud-filled craters in April 1916, many soldiers fought waist-deep in water. The objective was to take back the craters from the Germans. On April 6th, Germany began their counterattacks. On April 16th, an aerial photograph revealed the position of the Canadians in Germany, while enemy forces held the majority key points. At the end of the battle, on April 19th, 1,373 Canadian casualties occurred. An excerpt from a novel, The Blind Leading the Blind, well, more of a short story, The Blind Leading the Blind, The Battle of the St. Eloi Craters by Tim Cook reads, "The Battle of the St. Eloi Craters is one of those battles which has been forgotten, perhaps conveniently, by Canadian military historians. There are no books or articles devoted to it, and most military works use throwaway lines when describing the embarrassing affair." When you think about this battle, it sort of reminds you a little bit of Passchendaele, because when you think of a gruesome failure, well, it wasn't that much of a failure, but it was just a gruesome disaster. So Fraser, a private who fought at St. Eloi, describes the battle. He begins, "When day broke, the sights that met our gaze were so horrible and ghastly that they beggar description. Heads, arms, and legs were protruding from the mud at every yard, and dear knows how many bodies the earth swallowed. 30 corpses were at least shown in the crater, and beneath its clay waters other victims must be lying killed and drowned." It was a bleak battlefield. On the very last day of battling for control of the craters, Herbert Maybank was killed. While it was an utter failure, Tim Cook describes the battle as a lesson, albeit a bloody one, for the Canadians on how not to engage the enemy. It brought the realization that there was more to warfare than simply fighting. One had to know where one's troops were in relation to one another and the enemy. The same day he had died, Herbert Maybank was pronounced dead, and a letter went home informing his mother that her son had passed. So from his file, I learned a couple things about Herbert. Well, he was a Kelvinite, just like all of us, so it's pretty cool. He grew up without a father, so he must have been pretty lonely. He was the new kid in school when he moved to Winnipeg when he was 7, so I guess there's just another connection there. And I also know that there's never going to be a grandchild of his that will bear his name or have Herbert as his middle name, or there will never be a woman back home who will be Mrs. Herbert Maybank. I know that he died alone and he was most likely never given a proper service. There's no tombstone for him, and he was an only child. He didn't have a father, he didn't have any brothers or sisters, he didn't have a girlfriend. There was really no one to miss him other than his widowed mother. So today, right now, I'm very honored to be giving him a service and a celebration. I just want to acknowledge the fact that he lived and the fact that he died, and I don't want to forget that a man so young from our high school made the selfless decision to battle for our freedom and the freedom of others. So I think that we're here and we can miss him and honor him, and I just want to say thanks.